Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our SAT ACT Information Night. As you know, I'm Frank Musio. I'm the Director of Guidance. I'm thrilled to have with us tonight Mr. Jake Berman, who is the founder and teacher still of Jake SAT. Right here in Wantagh, you're doing some in what's the address? Wait.
3710 Woodbine Ave.
Woodbine.
That temple
yes.
right on the corner next
Temple.
to the Seaforth Bay Expressway.
Yes. But between he and I, we're going to try to make some sense out of this phenomenon of these standardized tests. As I often call them, they are a necessary evil. They are something that our kids have to do, I think, to be competitive. So our philosophy is let's prepare and do our best with them. Before I hand it over to Jake, you know, that's really, you know, my focus, and I'm here tonight really to answer any of your questions that have to do with our procedure here in Wantagh High School and maybe our perspective. And Jake will take more of the nuances of these tests. But that's what I want some of you in the audience and at home also to understand. Why do we even do this? Why, you know, this test optional and things like that? It's our opinion that to have a score or a set of scores is going to enhance your chances of admission, number one. But what we don't want is to focus so heavily on standardized tests that our students walk in and they're nervous wrecks and it inhibits their performance. We want them to keep it in perspective. It's not an IQ test. It's not a value test. I don't believe in that. But if it's one of those necessary evils, we're going to prepare you and you're going to do your very best. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Mr. Jake Berman.
All right, I agree with everything Frank just said. No one thinks the SAT is an excellent exam and that it's well designed and accomplishes effectively whatever it is supposed to accomplish, like how ready we are for college. But I think we can appreciate that there is a need for some type of standardized measure. You know, there tends to be grade inflation, and it's just hard to compare students from a school system here on Long Island to a school system in Nebraska or Florida. So, for better or worse, the SAT and ACT are the options that allow admissions officers to make apple-to-apple comparisons. So, the differences between the ACT and the SAT. Well, what's not different is colleges accept them both equally. You know, a lot of times parents will think like, okay, well, you know, my child wants to get into a nursing program at such and such school. Should we do the SAT or do the ACT? And she's like, no, false. It doesn't work like that. The exams are comparable. There are concordance tables. I think at the end of here, there's even like a link where you can just type in an SAT score and see the comparative ACT and vice versa. So the idea is we're exam agnostic. Like, you might like one more than another, but we're not doing this because we like it. We're doing this because we want to get our highest score possible. And for some students, it's the SAT. And for some, it's the ACT. And I wish I could tell you the secret way to figure out which one you need to do. Sometimes people think like, all right, well, if I do well with science in school, then I should take the ACT because that has a science section, which just became an optional section. But even the science section on the ACT doesn't test scientific knowledge. It tests your ability to read charts, graphs, and tables and make logical inferences. So basically, the SAT and ACT are reasoning exams that are much more alike than not, and you don't have to just take one. It's not that big a deal to learn a little bit about the other one. You know, assuming you would focus on one, you could learn a little bit about the other one and give that a shot too, and maybe you surprise yourself and you're like, you know what? I think if I practice more on that other one, I'll do better with that. Should we talk about the...
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm struck with the SAT and the ACT, 50 questions in 35 minutes. This is a speed test. Whereas, you know, the SAT is 54 questions in 64 minutes. So would you say that the SAT has more difficult questions that take more time, and the ACT has more questions that take less time?
Yeah, so more on these differences. And what's crazy is the numbers, Frank, that just pointed out about the amount of questions per time on the ACT. The ACT just did their first redesign since I've been teaching this stuff for over 21 years, and it was actually worse. They're trying to give people more time per question because they realize people don't like that really intense pacing urgency. So yeah, in a nutshell, the ACT is more straightforward, but you have to go faster. The SAT, you feel like it's designed to trick you in a way that the ACT isn't. I'm not saying the ACT is easier. I'm just saying the nature of the challenges are different, and sometimes we do better on one, sometimes we do better on the other. But yeah, what makes an SAT question tough is not really the underlying math content. It's the problem solving that the College Board layers on top of it all, and it makes it really hard for students who are accustomed to all their math problems being tested in a straightforward way in school to have to first decode, like, what's the agenda here? What's my plan on this question? And they're so confused, it leaves them thinking that, I don't think I've learned this math. It's like, no, you've learned the math. It's just a really tricky situation. Whereas on the ACT, they do test a wider breadth of math concepts, and that's where, even though things tend to be more straightforward, that's where you're more likely to run into an issue of, oh, I don't think I learned this math.
So this really goes with our philosophy here at Wantagh High School, and I know that Jake has the same as a SAT, ACT professional teacher. A lot of times students will say, well, I'm going to just go into the first one blind and, see how I do. and we wouldn't do that to our girls on the lacrosse team or guys on the football team or anything like that. So we do want to instill in our kids the concept of getting prepared for this prior to exams. And there are a couple of ways to do this, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Jake, but my thing is making a calendar as early as 10th grade or earlier. If there's anybody in this audience that has children in middle school, I'm not saying to take an ACT or an SAT in middle school, but I was after my son to read a book for years until he finally said, wow, yeah, I guess that's the way to go, because now I'm learning vocabulary by reading books. But as early as that, the best way to study for an SAT or an ACT in the verbal part is to get good at reading comprehension. But if we take a look at there's a lot of test administrations for SAT and ACT. So if you say, as some juniors in the room, I'm going to hit that March 2026 SAT, so maybe I want to back that up and maybe take a course in the winter. And maybe prior to that, I'll do some prep on my own. But that's kind of like developing that calendar. So that's looking at things now, planning ahead. A lot of times students will say, well, let me just register for it, and then I'll prepare in the 3 weeks that I have left. What are your thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, a lot of ideas you just covered there. I mean, for one, please know there's nothing wrong with taking an exam without preparing. I mean, essentially, that's what the PSAT is meant to be, True. Right? So unless you're going to do so well that you're going to score in the top 1%, become a National Merit Finalist, the PSAT is just to experience it. And I think that is the wake-up call for a lot of students. Like, okay, wow, like I thought I would do great with this because I have a 97 average in school, but this is different, and I do think I need to learn how to do it. But I often have students all the time who will take a real SAT before they take a program with me. And when I have the opportunity to speak with the parent in advance, and like we're setting this up, and they're saying like, yeah, we're thinking about registering him for the such and such exam, before the program begins, I say, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe they'll come into my classroom a little bit more ready to learn. They know what their problems were in the test. But the fact is, even when you're all the way prepared for these exams, it takes about 2 or 3 tries. So knowing that you haven't prepared yet, and you're going to, and you're going to have to lose 2 or 3 more Saturdays taking these exams, I don't know. I say, even when it's the student's idea, and very often it is the student's idea, they say, no, I just want to take one cold. I say, I know it sounds good in practice, but like when reality gets there, and you remind them like, oh, you've got your SAT this Saturday. It's like, but the thing Friday night, like you can't go out Friday night, you got your exam. So you don't get to do the fun thing that Friday night. You have to set your alarm on a Saturday, which just feels, blasphemous. So all other things being equal, I actually do kind of discourage taking an exam before you prepare. Like, you're going to take it a few times. Wait till you're actually ready to. The PSAT is the practice run. And then, Frank makes a good point here. I think we're all just so busy in lives, and that's why we need a night like this to be like, what should we be thinking? When should we be doing certain things? When you pick out a test date, like, you just reverse engineer, like, okay, so when am I going to start doing whatever to get ready for that date? I mean, that's how it is with all things in life. Any major event in your life you're planning, it doesn't just get here. Like, when you're going to have that thing, and you kind of back out your planning. And then in terms of how much prep a student might do before they actually take a class or work with a tutor, I mean, I feel like there aren't right or wrong answers for this sort of thing. I feel like it has a lot to do with students' desire and comfort level. I don't know, there's so many things we have going on all the time. There's so much competition for time and attention. And to do SAT prep, to do ACT prep, it's something else that's going to get less attention because you're doing that. So, I work with some students who are so incredibly motivated. They know they're going to take this thing so many times. They've already done so much preparation before they meet me. And other students, like, taking my class is the only thing they're going to do. And then lots of students, I mean, it's not just, I'm not going to meet them. No professional's going to meet them. They're not motivated enough to work hard. And we have different goals. Like, I don't ever judge a student when they determine this is not what I want to do. Even when, like, their parent is, like, talking to me and, like, wanting to get them signed up, if they're not a willing participant, you can't force them. But the best thing is to really figure out, like, what do I want next after high school? And if you're going to be competing to get into a certain college, it doesn't matter if it's test optional. The competition's going to be taking the exam. So, even early on in 11th grade, before you have a strong sense of where you're going to apply yet, if you know that's going to be important for you, I still think there can be a lot of motivation to get ready for these exams and put your best foot forward, because all it could do is create more options for you.
You and I had a conversation yesterday, and it made me think about a lot of things of how to approach this, because you're right. A lot of our kids, our participation here in Wantagh in sports and activities is through the roof. 80–85% of our kids are in clubs and activities and drama and everything. So, how do you begin? How do you begin to make those habits? You and I were talking about just developing habits and getting momentum. One of the things that works for some of our students is tiptoeing into this with Methodize. It's a product that we in the district have purchased, and so each of you, the students in the room here, under ClassLink, you have Methodize, and it's an online digital program that you could do at your own pace. It is free to you. Excuse me. The district has purchased it, and what I find is, some students, when they open up Methodize, and it's really the same as Blue Book. Blue Book, you can do practice exams on that too, and it'll give you tips and its modules. And once you at least do that, then you understand how the ACT is structured. You will understand how the SAT is structured. You might understand more about your strengths and weaknesses. And if you do 10 minutes a day, I mean, it's hard to talk yourself out of doing something that only takes 10 minutes. That could build that momentum that you and I were talking about, that a student can then say, okay, this isn't so bad. I'm going to do 10 minutes tonight. I'll do 10 minutes tomorrow night. And after a while, it's not so scary and it's not so bad. Then you might be ready for a class, or maybe not. It's because it's free. Some students stop there because they can't afford to go further, but they're still getting some preparation. Some students then, after doing something like Methodize, might say, now I'm ready for a course. But you have to think of what really is the best for you. If you're playing 3 sports, you may not be able to do a course. But you do them at night as well, though.
I mean, when people try and figure out timelines with me, like, well, when should we take the class? That's one of my big questions. Like, well, does she play any sports? Which seasons? Because if someone plays, field hockey and lacrosse, but in the winter, that's their time off. Well, it's like, well, that's when you should do your SAT class. And of course, you got to figure out driver's ed with all that as well.
Right. We chose, my son's a freshman in college now. So 2 years ago, when he was between sophomore and junior year, I had him doing Methodize. He's in another district, he did Methodize, and then he kind of got used to it, and it wasn't so scary, so he signed up for Jake. And I just want to give Jake SAT a little plug. I drop him off there when you were at Maria Regina, and the class would start at 7 o'clock, and it was mostly Wantagh and MacArthur students, so I knew a lot of kids there. And Jake would begin teaching at the dot of 7:30. And you would have this energy about you, and it was very, I think it held the kids' attention. And I would pick my son up at 9:30, and it would be like that same kind of energy. You would still be giving all of that, kind of instruction. So it was a good course, and that worked for us. It was the kind of thing, and I had to do it in the summer, as you say, because Peter's a soccer player. So he couldn't do it in the fall. He had to, take your class at night in September, but then it was all towards the October SAT. So I just want to give you that tidbit, because I had him start early, as many of our students do, and then culminating with the class. And actually, I shouldn't say culminating, because following that class, he was only a junior, you did a lot of follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is rarely a one-and-done thing. So the expectation is you prepare diligently, you take it at the end of a program or the end of your preparation cycle if you're doing it on your own. And it's good to not have the expectation, I'm going to be done after this one. And that really impacts all the planning, because I think a lot of times we think, well, I'm just going to take it the one time. That's certainly what I thought when I was in high school and I didn't understand anything about this exam. You just don't have an appreciation. It's not like an IQ test. It's not designed to figure out your exact ability and just give you that score. So it's one thing to develop all the skills and abilities and learn how to answer all the question types and all that, but to actually execute under all the real pressure of test day, that's a challenge in and of itself. And one thing that helps with that is just more comfort, more familiarity, and that happens with just getting more reps in. So you get more reps in by practicing a lot, but you get a few big important reps in by taking the exam more. So I just finished a cycle of programs with a lot of rising juniors, and a lot of people think like the October SAT isn't that early. It's like, well, it's not like 11th grade is where you're learning all the things you need for the SAT. You already know almost all of it. So yeah, but then the big question becomes like, okay, so we're taking the October 4th SAT. The PSAT is shortly after. Like, do we even bother with it? I say, yeah, it's another really good practice opportunity. Like, you could practice with the Blue Book app at home, and it does mimic what the real exam is like better than anything else, but you're sitting in your house. Like, the PSAT is an awesome no-stakes practice opportunity, even for a student who's already taken a real exam.
Absolutely. Yeah, we encourage students to do that. Take it in junior year, in addition to an SAT. Excuse me. Any questions on the content of the tests themselves, the differences, or preparation before we move on? Yes, sir.
The Methodize and the Blue Book app, the kids are giving this in school?
They're two different products. Methodize is a digital prep service that we buy here in the district. Every student, grades 10 through 12, has it on their Chromebook. It's under ClassLink, Methodize. It's a single login. They don't even need a login. They just click it and they're on. So I really do encourage students to start with that. Now, Blue Book is the product that is used by the College Board to deliver the SAT and the PSAT. And once students log into Blue Book, they have access to practice SAT and not ACT, SAT and PSAT materials. It is. It's an app. You have to either have a College Board account, or in the case of the students that are taking the PSAT this Saturday, they have a login with a ticket that I've given them. But those are both free programs. ACT.org also has some free online programs. And at the end of this, and these slides, by the way, will be on the website tomorrow, and they have some live links about ACT.org and Blue Book and collegeboard.com, things like that.
I think there's another question.
Oh, yes, hi.
Now that it's all digital and they're taking it on their Chromebooks, is it harder on Chromebook than a laptop?
It depends on the student's comfort with various devices. So, like, I personally don't use a Chromebook, so I use my own computer when I do my own taking real SAT exams and taking the Blue Book practice ones. I would say this, that despite how critical I tend to be of a lot of decisions the College Board has made, like, I'm not a huge fan of them and what they do with this exam, and that's why I take a lot of pleasure in breaking it down and making it easier for students. I feel like they've done a really nice job with designing this digital platform. The Blue Book app, that's the name of the digital platform that the students actually take the SAT and the PSAT on. And there are 7 full-length practice exams that are pretty close to what a real SAT is like, and you take that on the app as well. There are a few things I would tweak. The default text size is very small, and even though teenagers' eyes work great, you know what? It's hard to focus for multiple hours when it's that small. So, you know, I teach my students, like, use the hotkeys, make it bigger, and you do that in practice. So on test day, you know right away you have like a lot of fluency and automaticity with just instantly making it bigger or smaller depending on the question. But I think it does work pretty well. I have heard, you know, like those terrible stories. I mean, we're only a year and a half into the digital SAT, and we're hearing less and less of them. But like, I remember the first 1 or 2 test administrations. I don't know if everything went smoothly here, but like, high schools just weren't used to having all sorts of students who don't attend that high school need to get onto their Wi-Fi. So like, exams were delayed by multiple hours while things got figured out. That's not really happening anymore. But I wish I could have more specific information for you about like what the experience is with a Chromebook.
You know, is the Chromebook slower? I haven't found that. And really, the student, I would ask the students.
The students are shaking their head no. It's fine on the Chromebook, no issues. There's your answer. It's fine.
But what I do find, you know, the students get at least one piece of scrap paper, and they can have additional pieces of scrap paper for the math, and then we collect that, and I collect it. And I find that a lot of students are using the front and back of that piece of paper because that's how they're figuring out the problems. And some students ask for additional paper and things like that. So it'll always be a paper component to this because you're looking at a math problem on a screen and you really need to figure it out, you know, using pencil and paper. So that'll always be there.
And the ACT, we should acknowledge, is also offered digitally as well as on paper. And I think the ACT, you know, the ACT and the College Board, they're competing organizations, which is great for the end consumer, which is the student. Like, it's better options for them if you've got 2 separate organizations trying to essentially win their business. So I like that they're holding on to a paper option. I just think there's something much more natural about taking a paper-based exam. So when the College Board redesigned this to be digital, they dropped the long passages. From when everyone in the audience was in high school up until 2023, you had long passages. They would take up like a whole page. It'd be 90-something lines. There'd be like 10 questions or so on them. And now they don't have that. And when they were announcing these changes to the redesigned digital SAT, I thought, like, wow, they're really just pandering to what people want, and they're dumbing the exam down. And once the exam came out, it was like, oh, no, I was wrong. They absolutely did an excellent job keeping the challenge level sky high, despite the fact you're not reading more than 1 paragraph at a time. And I feel like they did an excellent job with those decisions because you can't annotate anymore. So when you're reading a long passage, the key to keeping your focus is you're constantly taking notes. And I would always teach all my students, you know, every paragraph or so, write down like what happened so far. So the goal is you're reading with the intention of writing a note on it. Like, make that your entire agenda. And as a byproduct, it forces you to really read actively and pay attention. So that's all well and good on the SAT because it's just a paragraph now. Like, you don't need to annotate a paragraph. And the fact is, the question's on the left side of the screen, the paragraph's on the right side, it's not going anywhere. The ACT, while they've made changes to it, they didn't do an overhaul like the way the College Board did with the SAT. So the passages are still pretty much the same length, like 90-something lines, but it's not a great user experience when you're just scrolling a lot to find the line, and you can't annotate on it. Like, it doesn't matter if there's a tool, you could type in a note. It's just not the same thing. So I tend to encourage students, if they're taking the ACT, paper. And that's not an option for the SAT, but I think that's okay because they drop the long readings.
So our next topic really is, all right, now I have a score. Is that enough? We encourage students to try both, and then they're really the best judges of which is the better test for them. They take it once of each, and then they'll maybe take another of the one of their choice. I can't tell you which is more popular statistically. You know, I think the SAT is more of a popular test in this region of the country. ACT is a little bit more popular in the West, but colleges, as Jake said, they accept both. I'm of the opinion that you know, we want our students to focus and do as well as they can on these tests, but not to drag this out. We really would love to have kids to be done with this concept by either the spring of junior year or October of the senior year, because then they're writing college essays and they're doing a lot of other things that have to do with college admissions. There are times when I do see seniors in the November test, and that's because they might be 10 points away from their goal or a scholarship goal or something like that, and they'll take it again. But taking it 5-6 times, I don't encourage that. Do you?
Absolutely not. There are extenuating circumstances where I don't meet a student until they're going into senior year, and maybe they took it 3 times in 11th grade, and it's like, okay, well, now that I've got you and I'm teaching you how to do this thing, you can't just give it one try. Like, anything can happen. You can wake up that day and not be feeling great. So I want any student I work with to be able to give themselves at least 2 tries. But yeah, I agree with Frank. Taking it like that late in the game. And you also bring up another good point about they're chasing a scholarship. So the reason for taking these exams isn't just, oh, it could be helpful for admissions. When you get into that whole academic scholarship merit aid conversation, almost always it's necessary to have a certain score on these exams. And sometimes I work with students who already know, okay, I want to go to this college. I can totally get into it right now. Like, I don't need to learn to take an SAT class or anything, but I want to, because if I can get my score up to here, well, then that's worth 50% scholarship or whatever the number is. When you consider the amount of effort, just like all the time, all the hours, and if it can get you just even a little partial $25,000 a year, times 4 years, $100,000, it ends up being like a really good ROI on your time to prepare for an exam like this. But yeah, that's just an important element to be aware of as well. It's not just maximizing your admissions opportunities. It can be trying to get merit aid as well.
This conversation fits into the context of everything that you're going through as juniors and seniors, or sophomores for that matter, of searching for colleges and going on college websites. So, you know, we say, you know, where would I know, or how would I know if I should send the scores? You know, what's the mean or the median score at this particular college that I'm interested in? Is there a scholarship cutoff, something like that? So I encourage you to go on these college websites, and when you go to college fairs, to ask these questions as well, and that'll guide you. You know, students always ask us, I got a 1200, should I send it? Okay, let's look at the college website. Why don't you give the college admissions office a call? Sometimes, lately, they've been much more clear of saying, you know what, if you've reached 1200, send it. If you're not at 1200, you might be at a disadvantage by sending it. We in the guidance department can guide you only so far, and we can use the hunches that we have based upon the experiences that we've had. But there's no right or wrong answer with this. And some students have said, no, I don't want to send my 1190. It's just, you know, And sometimes students do, and sometimes students get an advantage and sometimes they don't. This is confusing, and I wish it wasn't, but what my message is going to be this. Do as well as you can on the test. Maximize your score first. Then let's have those conversations. Visit the colleges, talk to the admissions professionals, talk to us, talk to the teachers, and then let's put our heads together and make that decision together.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can find a surprising degree of transparency from the admissions departments. And I heard of situations, this is kind of like during the later end of COVID, where they were even reaching out to people being like, we need you to reapply without your SAT score because that'll help you get in, which is a very strange thing. And it makes you wonder, like, what's the point of all this test optional stuff? Like, are you trying to make things easier? So when a lot of schools started flipping back to requiring it, you know, it came from the top. Like MIT was the first because they're kind of in their own universe. They don't have to worry about what anyone else is doing. They're going to make the best decisions for themselves. And I mean, they kind of know it at a school like MIT. Like if you're not able to get an 800 in math, you probably aren't going to succeed here. But then it spilled over into a lot of the Ivy League schools. And I remember it was really interesting when the director of admissions at Yale explained about their decision to go back to requiring it, because it seemed like it was promoting, you know, equality. It was just so much more egalitarian to just be like, test optional, you don't even have to send a score. But the reason why they wanted it was they knew that there were students in like a rural zip code in Mississippi who are brilliant and really hardworking, and you know, they want to get people like that, but they scored a 1480 on the SAT, so they'd be embarrassed to send that to Yale because, you know, you need a 1580. But what they didn't know was Yale would be so excited that that young girl got a 1480 because that's showing them, oh, she can hack it here. So I do think that you might be surprised with how much you can learn from just a nice phone conversation. Or as Frank said, I mean, campus visits are the best, where you can speak face to face and find out, like, hey, you know, what sort of score, like, this is what our score is. Just tell them, like, they're not going to remember you and write it down like, oh, it was that blonde boy or something, you know? Just say, hey, this is our score. Do you think we should send it? Because we'd be really excited to get into here. And I think you'll probably hear a really good answer.
I think I need to just back up a step, because I think I'm making the assumption that everybody knows how to do this, sending the scores and stuff. When you take a College Board exam, for example, whether that be a PSAT or an SAT or an AP, you have a College Board account, and the score magically appears on your account when it's scored, when it's ready. And then you have this portfolio of tests, and some are APs and some of them are SATs. And you get to pick. They belong to you. They don't belong to the school. We don't put them on your transcript. We don't put them in your file. We don't do anything with your SAT scores or your AP scores for that matter. They belong to you. And because they belong to you, the College Board's going to charge you for sending them somewhere. Get used to that. But that's when you say, well, on this test date, I got a higher math score on November, and in December, I got a higher verbal score. So what do? I got to send both. So that's why, and there's a term called super score. We don't super score for you, and you don't super score for you. But you send your highest math, and you send your highest verbal, and the college does that for you. They say, okay, this was the highest that they've attained. But that's the term super score, if you've heard that term. But I thought it might be important for us to backtrack and go over that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. So when you take an SAT, you get 4 free score reporting sends, but you have to choose that before you even know what your score is. So when I'm working with 11th graders, I typically say, like, it's not the most expensive thing in the world to send a score to a college. Like, you don't know how it's going to go on any given exam. Like, I think we're all going to feel more comfortable. Let's not take advantage of those 4 free sends. Let's let the dust settle and see what we're dealing with later. But then when I'm working with a senior much later in the game, and like, you know, whatever challenges they were going through in 11th grade where they couldn't take it then, or even if they did but it wasn't great, and now they're performing at a much higher level in practice, and clearly this is going to be a much better performance, that's a situation where it's like, yeah, of course, you know, you already know where you're applying. just take advantage of the 4 free ones. And the other thing, I don't know if you've heard about this, Frank, but one thing that colleges seem to care about a lot is level of demonstrated interest. And it's
Yes,
a
very
little
much.
unclear about what sort of things count in terms of campus visits. I mean, I've heard things where, there are these little trackers in emails, and just if you're opening up the emails they're sending you. And I've heard that one of these measures of demonstrated interest is if you send them one of those free reports. I guess they know if it's one of those free ones. So that means like, oh wow, like this student only had the ability to send 4, and they sent one of them to us. And it's just so unclear. I wish I could tell you like at what point in the calculations it's worth it to just, send it. That might help push you over the edge, but it's just another factor to consider.
No, that's an excellent point. I didn't think of that, Jake, that, colleges have been very clear with us of saying, if we send emails to your students and they're not opening them up, we know that, and we go on to someone else. That's why, if you're applying to 10 colleges, keeping track of 10 colleges is a little easier than keeping track of 20. And some of our students apply to as many as 20 to really cast that large net.
I thought 10 was going to be the big number, actually.
No, it's so easy to apply via Common App now that students will say, oh, I'm just going to apply there, just it's a reach, and I'll apply. Okay, and we'll support that 100%. But that's another portal that you have to keep track of. Any questions about how you report scores, or when or why you would report scores? No? Okay, let's move on. Like I said, these slides will be on the website tomorrow, but some of the slides that we really wanted to highlight was the ACT website, where its preparation is, and the SAT website, College Board, and that set of preparation. As Jake said, we've included a concordance table. It's funny, we used to have these kinds of evenings, and I would get so much mail from College Board and ACT and so on, and everything was in print. I don't get anything in print anymore. Everything that the SAT and the ACT puts out now is all digital. And that's why there's nothing for us to give you tonight, but you probably don't want to clog up your coffee table the way mine is clogged up with mail, so I'd save you that. The last link is something called Find My SAT. Did you tell me about this yesterday? Yes, and I included it.
Yeah, I was going through, I think you asked me, like, do you think there's any other links we should include? I'm like, I don't know, that's like the main stuff. I was like, you know what, actually, I had a student last year reach out to me on social media. He wanted me to promote something he did, and anytime someone does that, I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing with my social media accounts. But he explains that, and this kid was brilliant. He scored a 1600 just preparing on his own. And he had to travel very far to take the SAT. And it was a very stressful challenge for him and his family just to be able to take the test. And he's not alone. So even though, here in our parts of Long Island, like if Wantagh's not offering that SAT, I mean, within 5 miles, you have so many other high schools, and plenty of them are offering it. But it's not like that in all parts of the country. And even around here, sometimes it can be tough to secure test center availability. This is something that's really changed a lot just in the past year. It used to be the August SAT was, and still is, like impossible to get into on Long Island, but every other one was like super easy. Like as long as you registered by the deadline, like you're fine. And even if you missed the deadline, you were still fine for availability. You just had to pay like a $30 late fee. But this year, it's different, and I'm not really sure why the College Board is managing things in that way. So even for my own students, this is becoming a very useful tool. So what this student designed was, he built a website, you put in your email, your zip code, and then I think you click from like a drop-down menu, like which test date you want. Yeah. Oh. Perfect, thank you. So you could see the default on the drop-down menu is the next national test date in a month, November 8th. And you get an email anytime new seats become available. So sometimes that's a new test center opening up. Other times, it's a test center opening up more seats. So I wanted to try it out once, and I was so excited to try it out for the August SAT. And I'll say it's not perfect. I told him, I was like, I would love it if you created just one more fields where people can choose how many miles of a radius they're willing to travel. Because I think it might default to 75 miles, which I think for certain people in certain parts of the country is very appropriate. But for here, so I put in 11793, August SAT. I'm getting emails constantly about high schools in New Jersey, even in eastern Pennsylvania. And Connecticut High School out in Bohemia, they just kept opening up new seats. I would get an email like every 2 days from Find My SAT. And I told him, I was like, listen, this is annoying. He's like, well, it's only for a discrete period until the exam happens. He's actually really, really bright guy. It took him a few days to get back to me when I made that request, but he gave me like an incredibly long email with all sorts of thoughtful reasons why he decided to not add that. And I couldn't challenge that. So for me personally, just like I'm sure most of you, my inbox just gets crazy. And I kind of resented all these emails coming in. But also, like, I was doing it as an experiment, not for me. When you're doing it for you because you want to get into a certain test center, oh man, this is a wonderful tool.
You know, it's interesting. Most Wantagh students want to take it here, but some students have told me, you know, I took it at MEPM, I didn't know anybody, and I was able to really focus. We are not an ACT center, and our students, from what I can see, haven't had a problem taking it at Belmore Kennedy, Plain Edge, Massapequa. Those are really they've been very generous with us. We give the SAT in every test administration with the exception of August. That's because the floor is just about dry when we walk in on the first day of school. So I can't do that. But I'm also limited in the number of proctors. So students will come to me, and we max out around 140 test takers. And it sounds like a lot, but it's 7 rooms, and it's hard to get 8 or 9 proctors on a weekend. You know, this test is on Columbus Day weekend, PSAT. So that wasn't easy. But so just so you know where I'm coming from, so students will come to me and they'll say, oh, I'm dying to take it at Wantagh because I have a game in the afternoon. And that's when I call. I call the college board. So my advice to students here in the room and listening at home is if you know you want to take the November SAT, register now. It's not too early to do that. And you'll secure a seat here. About half the students that take the test here, that took the test on October 4th, were from out of district. And that pains me. I want to see our own students, you know, be able to take it here. So register early. And that goes back to that calendar that we talked about. You know, think about, okay, I'm gearing up for a December test date. I'm going to register for December. I'm going to register for a course like Jake's. And that's my calendar for the fall. So, but there are times when students do get locked out. And August is terrible because a lot of Long Island schools are like ours. We're still preparing, you know, for the school year, you know, in August.
Yeah, I mean, the August one, it debuted in 2017. They dropped the January SAT, which I think was a smart idea because when you have an SAT in the winter, there's always issues with inclement weather. So they dropped the January, they added the August, and I was so excited for that. And the first year when there was like only 5 test centers on Long Island, I was like, all right, well, there are going to be more. And like, it's just kind of been the same every year. And there's usually like maybe 3 in Nassau County, like Manhasset will do it, and I forget. But this year, I think it was maybe 0. It was really wild. I don't know what was going on with that. So it's really a tough one to plan for, which is unfortunate because it's the only SAT when you're not in school. And when you're in school, you're kind of busy with schoolwork. You're probably not getting quite as much sleep as you want, but in August you are. So I never encourage people to have to like go drive far and travel and make a trip out of it. I don't know, but sometimes, like, you know, if you got your cousins over in New Jersey or something, I mean, I just think it's a good opportunity when you're not stressed with the school year. I think I saw a question.
Oh, is there a question? Yes. Collegeboard.com. Yes, the PSAT kind of, and the question is, you know, where do we sign up for these exams? With the exception of the PSAT and the APs, that's done in-house, and we register students that way. The other College Board exams and the ACT are, you have to go on those websites. So the students have to develop a College Board account and an ACT account. And I always thought it was important that the student themselves makes that username and password. So many students, they've come in on a SAT morning and they draw a blank and they forget their login. And I said, well, what's your password? They say, I don't know, my dad made it. Or my mom made it, and they don't know it. So, little tip, students in the room, make your own username and password. Write it down on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, and you won't forget it. What was the other point we were going to make? About the test centers. If you do get locked out of one of our test centers at Wantagh here, come and see me, and I'll do my best, to open that up for you. Yes, question. I would say about
13 days.
Is it 13 days?
Yeah,
Okay.
you take it on a Saturday, 2 Fridays later. Well, that's actually the first day of score availability. Most scores are available on that day, but not all. And that's always upsetting when your score isn't ready. But
The PSAT, for some reason, takes a bit longer, and but that would go on the College Board account as well. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
So I heard this about the digital exam, some of this is true. So depending how you do, say on the math, you get tracked to a different English, or is it?
so it's adaptive, yeah. So there are 4 modules. There's 2 English modules, and then there's 2 math modules. We get the same first module, and you would consider the challenge level of that like medium. And then depending on how you perform, and the College Board is not transparent with these numbers, so the feeling is out of 27 English questions that the over-under is around 9 or so questions. So if you're getting just a few questions wrong, you get a more challenging second module. And if you get more than that amount wrong, you get a less challenging second module. That it might seem unfair. I think it's actually the fairest the SAT's ever been. One beautiful byproduct that they're accomplishing by doing this is that it's the shortest the SAT has ever been. It's always been this whole 4-hour ordeal. Now it's 2.5 hours, and the reason they can accomplish that is because of the adaptive nature, and they say that based on your performance in the first module, which has the full breadth of difficulty levels, that they have a sense of what your score is going to be within 30 points, but they're not assigning you a score. You have the same amount of questions again, and it gets more challenging, it gets less challenging. Now, some students are going to be kind of on the bubble. Depending on the day, they might just barely get the more challenging one or just barely miss the more challenging one, and then it's like, oh, now I'm going to track to lower. It's not quite like that. There's going to be a lot of overlap. So it might be, all right, if you get the more challenging second module, obviously the top score is 800 if you're perfect in both modules, right? I don't know what the lowest score you can get is. It would be very low. Like if you just, I don't know, fell asleep and answered 0 questions, like you're not going to get a higher score than someone who performed their best in the less challenging module. So the feeling is, and again, we don't know for sure, the College Board isn't forthcoming about this, but if you get the less challenging second module, and it was weird, like you probably shouldn't have had, like you're typically better than that, and like you crush it, and you get every question right. The feeling is that your best score is probably around a 600. But like your lowest score, if you do horrible in the harder second module, is going to be lower than that. So there's some overlap. So for a student who's going to be scoring like somewhere in the 1100s, they're going to end up with that score, whether they get the more challenging second module or the less challenging second module.
Okay. I have a question. The SAT used to have one of the administrations, you could purchase a question and answer service. Is that still around?
Unfortunately, no. So it was 3 times a year was the March, May, and October SAT exams. It was $18. It's the best $18 you could ever spend. You'd get the full copy of every single question, your answer, the correct answers, and there's no better data to like figure out, well, what happened? Because, a lot of times students are surprised. They really thought they had done better. And when you're really surprised, because you have a sense of how it went, like you know when you're figuring questions out, and if you've been practicing a lot, like you could compare it to what things are like for you in practice. So when you're surprised to the downside, it means a lot of things slipped through. And the beauty of back in the day, it's not even back in the day, it's just from 2023 and before, when you could see what happened, all of a sudden you could rub your face in all those stupid mistakes you made, and it gives you a lot of confidence that this was not an indictment of my ability. I am as good as I know I am. I just have to really lock in and be more careful that day. Now, they are not doing that anymore. So we don't know
That's too
exactly
bad.
what happened on test day, but I could still promise you this. Anytime a student is very disappointed because they've been practicing diligently and the score was too low, I bet a bunch of careless mistakes happened.
Yeah. Questions? Okay, I'm going to just end with this comment about the preparation, and I hope that you do consider it. This is not easy. You know, maximizing your score takes practice. It doesn't have to be drudgery, but, you know, I know the students that went to Jake SAT, they were given homework. And the students who did that homework diligently and really put thought into it, they increased their score. They maximized their score. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. We want you to understand what these tests are about, and go about this in a very methodical way. Put in the work, plan ahead, and this will be a good thing for your portfolio, and that's what we want for you. Okay.
And I just want to add to that even though we're here tonight just to give you as much planning information as possible regarding these exams, we're not trying to put undue pressure over the whole situation. And, you know, there are times where I'm having a phone call with a parent who's considering working with me, and after a conversation, we decide, like, you know what, I think they're going to suffer so much from everything I'm learning about this student. It just seems like this is going to be a tough exam for them to succeed on. And even if it has an adverse impact on their whole college admissions experience, I just feel like, you know, mental health is more important than taking another
agree.
test. And as Frank pointed out, like, this doesn't attach any sort of value to you. It is not an IQ test. And you have students who do very well in school who do amazing on this test. And you have students who do very well in school who just, like, they can't ever wrap their head around the challenge of the SAT no matter how hard they try. And ultimately, it's not a test score that's going to make you successful in life. And I know we'll feel like, no, but the test score gives me access to the better college and then I have a better name on my diploma. It's like, yeah, that's all nice, but that's not going to make you successful in life. Like, the success comes from within. So I hope that the students I work with know that as much as I'm trying to help them with this, ultimately, like, I'm trying to help them even more in life than just this. And the principles that connect to all the mindset pieces that you need to succeed on the SAT, they're the same principles that connect to success in every endeavor in life. And ultimately, I want them to do well. We're working hard on this, and it can open some doors. But ultimately, like, we have to accept it for what it is and not feel like this is the most important thing, because it shouldn't be the most important thing for anyone.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jake. Oh, we have a question. Yes. The question is, the tests are digital. Should we prepare digitally? I'm of mixed opinion on that because I've seen students buy the old-fashioned books, and they like that too. What do you think, Jake?
Well, like I said before, you know, regarding the ACT, which still has the paper option, I would default to the paper option. There's something comfortable about marking the questions up in front of your face. And certainly, you're going to have some students who, like Frank said, prefer working in a book. I think the most important thing is learning all the skills and knowledge you need for the exam, and you can still do that with paper-based materials. But it is very, very important that you at least do some practice in the College Board Blue Book app. Like, you don't have to do other digital stuff, but like that's exactly the app you're using on test day, and you just need to build some comfort and familiarity. You know, there's enough decisions you're going to have to make in the moment on test day, but there's some decisions you can pull forward, like, do I like the crossout tool? Do I like the highlighting tool? How am I going to use the Desmos pop-up window? What size do I like it to be? And you figure that out by practicing a few Blue Book app practice exams.
You can still find print material on Amazon, you know, SAT prep and things like that. But the vehicle is going to be the online app, and that, yeah, like Jake said, get used to that as well. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. We hope you got something out of this evening. We're going to stay for some questions, and certainly if you have questions for me, you know my email. Jake SAT is your email?
Yeah, we should have put my email
I
up there.
should've,
But honestly, if you
yes.
type anything into Google about Jake and the SAT, it's going to bring you right to my website, and I'm happy to chat with you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming.